Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Today is Monday, June 19th. Usually we do Sundays at 10. Today's Monday at 9, and we have to be flexible with, schedules and stuff like that. Next week we'll be back to Sundays, probably, most likely. Let's set our intention, make aspirations by saying the four immeasurables prayer, as we do every week. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. Okay, let's jump right in and meditate. We're not gonna do a review today, but we'll do meditation, and then we'll do a little chat and Q&A, question and answer. I'm assuming most of you. Go ahead. No. Go ahead. You brought it up. You want to do it.
Before we meditate, let's expel the negativity from our main three channels: central channel, blue, and white and red. Red is connected with desire and attachment, things that lead us to obsessions and addictions. White is connected to anger, to impatience, to frustration that builds up to anger and then goes into hatred. And the central channel expels ignorance. The central channel is where the wisdom winds abide. And so we are returning. The white channel is also the channel for the method. And the red channel is the method of the wisdom. And so when we expel anger, attachment, aversion, and ignorance, we're purifying our three main channels, which are like the pillar that holds our physical container, that holds our body, and through which the winds which are connected to the mind are connected. So when we purify the winds in the three channels, we purify the vehicle that moves the mind in a proper way rather than the way of the three main afflictions. So making the Vajra fist on both hands, we start with the right hand, and we're drawing in pure white air blessed by Buddhas. And we're expelling the negativity of the left channel. And be mindful, intend the negativity to be expelled and the channel to become clear. We switch our hands with our left hand. Holding the Vajra fist, we put our hands on our knees, and now we're working with the central channel. Air coming through both of the nostrils behind our eyes, coming to the point, 4 fingers below our navel. We're holding, and then expelling ignorance through our central channel. Expelling ignorance through our central channel. And on the last out breath, the green bindu at the heart center, which is our consciousness, we will expel it through the central channel, which goes all the way to our Brahma aperture, to our crown, and the green bindu will be expelled and its consciousness merging with space. And consciousness merging with space, awareness merging with everything, we take that right into meditation.
We talk about in this class, we know we're sitting in the posture and we're breathing, relaxing, and then becoming aware of what the mind is doing. And as becoming aware of the fact that thought has arisen, and then leaving it where it is. But what is important and in this practice is that when you notice that you're thinking, just take note of what it is you're thinking. And say, like, once again, don't follow it, don't unravel it, don't push it away, don't judge it. This is a bad thought, this is a good thought, this is a virtuous thought, this is unvirtuous. Just notice that it has arisen and just take note of what it is. And this is what we spoke about before, about this path being a lot of it about being about brutal honesty, with oneself. And as Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche said, not chickening out. In terms of facing, who we are, with our defects and faults and good qualities and all that, Take note of what it is, the thought, if it's petty, if it's vicious, if it's kind, don't judge it, but just make a note of what it is. So we're seeing what our mind does. I think it's very common for us to think all our thoughts, opinions, ideas, reactions are very justified, especially if we're educated, or if we're successful, or if we're, we think of ourselves as good people, who are kind people, generous people. So then all these other impulses and thoughts regarding the self kind of get justified under, well, I vote the right way, my politics are correct, my philosophies are in line with basic, kindness and humanity. Well, but we're still human beings, and we still have our own ego that protects, that self-protective instinct that separates us from the other. Back to the breath. Notice that thought and let it dissolve back into the sky-like nature of mind. Mm. We talk about mindfulness a lot in this class, and it's, well, what are we being mindful of? Mindful of what? Mindful of what the mind is doing, how the mind is reacting, interacting. Great, really good. want to read something. This is Zalsar Khyentse Rinpoche. Zalsar Khyentse Rinpoche is on our website, our Solidago Productions, where we have a list of teachers and publications and things like that, books. But this is just a quote. Our friend Shamel, who's in the Sangha of Khencho Lodro Taye Rinpoche, she has a very good Instagram page that I often repost on my stories. It's called Pema Lotus, Pemalotus. It's really, really wonderful. Great photos and just tremendous quotes from Buddhist teachers. If you think this world is mundane and that another more sublime world also exists, that is duality. When you go beyond the mundane and the sublime, that is non-duality. The examples become increasingly elaborate and include explanations relating to all 6 paramitas. Paramitas are virtuous activities, basically. If the paramita of generosity is understood in the context of non-duality, that kind of generosity will lead you to liberation. The bodhisattva who understands this will also see that liberation itself is generosity. If you long for liberation because you do not like samsara, that is duality. The only way you can actualize non-duality is by going beyond liking liberation and disliking samsara, which is a very heavy quote and concept when you start to talk about non-duality, but it also basically talks about how, in a way, practicing the paramitas in itself is liberation, in a way. When you're actively engaged in something like generosity or discipline of patience or compassion, true compassion or loving kindness and things like that, that is liberation. To have a mind that, understands that that's a worthy way to dedicate yourself and your mind and your energies and your activities, and that is liberation in itself, that the mind has gotten to a point that understands that decision is the path. It reminds me a little bit of the quote by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who talks about basically talking about paramitas, but he specifically was talking about patience as an obligation if you're a Dharma practitioner, not as this that it is part and parcel of your practice. It's not something separate that you have to do, it's not it's not something that you have to withstand, like it's this forbearance that you have to do because you're a Dharma practitioner. It's your obligation because as a practitioner, you've made this decision to walk this path, and that's part of it. It's not separate from our own liberation. Like we're waiting for our own liberation, and in the meantime, we have to do these things. No, this is the path, and opportunities to practice in itself it is liberation, and it's that the mind knows that, liberated from the past way of thinking, which is about the self, protection of the self, always advancing our own agenda, so to speak, things like that. And in a sense, waiting for waiting for enlightenment before we can, do the right thing, when we're enlightened, then all the faults will go away, and then we can, act effortlessly for the benefit of all beings. But what about the meantime? What does that mean? Are we just going to be waiting, or what are we going to be doing? That's why paramitas, the virtuous activities, virtue, why it's so important, why there's so much stress placed on those things, those qualities. When you talk about non-duality, you're talking about emptiness, but emptiness in the Buddhist concept, or non-duality in the Buddhist concept, is always spoken of as being inseparable from compassion. Okay, Victoria, if you have anything you want to add from, we wanted to bring up some things from last class. Maybe you should take it from there.
But just to continue on what Michael was saying, the nature of suffering is being in the state between desire and aversion, wanting this, rejecting this, splitting the world always into two. The split actually is the ignorance. It's in us. It makes us chase for the things and be restless for the things that we think will make us happy, and then have an aversion to any kind of a difficulty. But that very chasing for the things of desire is what also brings about the things of the things that we don't want, because in the pursuit that turns into restlessness becomes very, very strong desire, obsession, and addiction. We meet pain right there and then. We create the pain right there and then. So as long as we are all between these two forces internally, it's like an internal dynamic. It's not, doesn't exist in the world. When we have things to which we have aversion, it is the way that we process or relate to something. When there is a great desire and we're chasing for something, we want something that someone has, we want something that we think will make us happy, we want something that we think is owed to us, etc., etc. When we are in the grasp of these two internal intrinsic forces, we are feeling suffering, we are experiencing suffering, and we are also creating more suffering that we will have in the future, such as a person who's addicted to food. While they're all craving, the next, that whole day can be spent in an obsession about the next meal, how I'm gonna eat it, where I'm gonna eat it, what I'm gonna do. That thought is accompanied with the sensation of suffering and pain. So we are creating suffering and pain. This is what karma really is. We are the machinery which is experiencing it now, which has experienced it in the past, and which is already now in the present moment creating the future suffering. And incidentally, also things like diseases are also connected to our 5 afflictive emotions. The different diseases of the different organs are connected to the different afflictions. I don't want to go into it. There are medical tantras that deals that we cause by imbalance of the movement of these winds. And at any given time that we are in this polarity within the grasp of attachment and aversion, all we are doing is creating suffering for ourselves. And of course, that suffering, we communicate it like a disease. We pollute the air with it. When we are in the room, the charge of our mood is there. We pollute already body, speech, and mind, specifically through speech and body, through our activity and the things we say to others. We are already creating the pollution for them and creating obstacles for ourselves in the future that we, of course, will have to deal with, because everything we created in the negative sense, we will have to undo. That is why we're here. We are here because we're mopping up, the spill in aisle number 9. All of our difficult relationships are there in order for us to take them as fuel and undo and unravel the knots. So that's why last time when we had class, we said, we mentioned to understand difficulties in the way of rejoicing for the opportunity of practice. Because as long as we process our world, as long as we process and have experience, I don't want this, that person's difficult, this thing is, I don't want it. If that is our approach between desire and aversion, we are doing nothing. Our opinions are irrelevant. That's very, very baby mind. As Buddhist practitioners, we take all the difficulties, we understand the difficulties on a completely different level, and we absorb the difficulties into our life and burn them like fuel to create positive thinking, positive action of body, speech, and mind. We radically take the difficulties because there are ours. We have created them. We understand that, and we transform them into another way. You know, there's no way of putting out a fire by pouring gasoline and lighting the match. So if something that angers us and we become inflamed and our anger grows even further, we go out and we burn everything in our sight. Clearly, that's not the answer to add more emotion, to add more fuel, to become more entrenched into this, I am right to be angry. There's no such thing. We've discussed this many, many times, you know, about righteous anger. And we wanted to bring, you know, we wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, emotions like anger and jealousy. Actually, jealousy is a subtle emotion. Anger is a very, very visible emotion. That's why it's called, when it is transformed, it is mirror-like wisdom, because anger is very easy to see. Our body becomes different, our breath becomes different, even our vision becomes different. Things sometimes change color and shape. They become, you know, transformed because the emotion has such an influence on us that it like radically changes our reality, and so it is easy to perceive. It's called mirror-like wisdom because we as practitioners know it comes from us. The enemy is not that person. Crazy people do crazy things all the time, including ourselves, but we don't have to unleash onto them with this. Rather, if we see, you know, a difficult person and we say, okay, this difficult person is here in my path, this is my road, I'm moving through this, I am at this fork in the road with a very difficult situation, difficult parent, difficult coworker, difficult child, etc., etc. What do? Do I set the world on fire, or do I bring water of wisdom and I extinguish it for them and for myself? That's really practice. You know, this is how we approach things. This is how we understand it. And in that respect, we rejoice for the difficulties because we are saying to ourselves, just as when we have an illness in our life, we as practitioners, we say, yes, I have this illness because it's a result of one of my 5 afflictive emotions. And I rejoice for having it because now I can use it as an opportunity to overcome this with patience, perseverance, and with generosity. As Buddhists, for example, when we're ill, we think of all, like, if, you know, if a person has cancer or a headache or a cold, at that time you think, let me take on all other beings, same disease. As long as I'm suffering, I might as well do it for all sentient beings who are under the same weight of the same affliction, of the same result of this affliction. And so you expand that space, and instead of, you know, being crushed down by woe is me, by that defeatist kind of mentality, you can actually, while you're suffering, you can also do tremendous work on behalf of all sentient beings. Each and every act can be transformed from bringing us to this barrel of selfishness and suffering. Every act can become an act of practice. When we eat, we dedicate first to the Buddhas, although Buddhas need nothing from us, but we dedicate in order to really understand the nature of supreme generosity, because Buddhas, all they do is think of us and benefit us. living Buddhas like our teachers, a lot of whom suffer, a lot of physical pain to remain in this world to, 100 years, 95 years, just to help us schmucks here in this world. Uh, Taking a shower, you can think, I'm purifying everything and everyone, may all the impurities drop away. Any kind of an act, crossing a street, you may think, may I and all the sentient beings crossed over enlightenment, cross from ignorance into and transcend samsara and nirvana and the longing, attachment to one and rejection of the other. May I and all sentient beings cross into the purity of Buddha fields of our own nature, of our own pristine nature. And so we work with difficult situations. We work with all situations and turn them into practice, especially rejoicing for difficult situations, because that's where we are forced to work. We cannot, the other solution is like being like a kid, having a baby mind with a baby response. I don't want this, I reject this, I hate, and furthering, creating bigger saturation and creating seeds for our future to have those responses over and over again. Because when we repeat a response in a certain way, it becomes an identity. It becomes who we are. And in this context, I wanted to bring to speak about 3 kinds of laziness that we just heard from. Thupten Jinpa was recording a teaching last week at Wisdom Publications, and he said, in such a precise Buddhist psychology as it is, and he talked about the 3 kinds of laziness. One kind of laziness is when we make ourselves very, very busy, so we actually never complete the task. We prepare, we run here, we run there, but we actually don't sit down and we don't approach the task. We don't meditate, or we don't resolve a difficult situation, which requires us possibly maybe to go to that difficult person and make right with them and change the dynamic and extinguish the fire. We always prepare. We say, oh, I'm going to do it. Oh, I'm going to, I'm preparing next week, next month. And then when we look in hindsight, that difficult person has been with us for 30 years and we've done nothing to remedy the situation, Next kind of a laziness is the defeatist attitude. The world is horrible, everyone's horrible, whatever I do doesn't make any difference. And so we talk ourselves out of it in this complete victimization aspect of viewing ourselves. We simply turn anger into depression, and by rejecting the whole world and thinking that it's just, vile, horrible refuse, basically. And in the meantime, all we do, we call it depression, and we experience feelings of depression. But at the same time, there's also so much arrogance by thinking that everyone is horrible, everything is against me, no one has the capacity to come and be worthy of me or give me something. There's a judgment on the world and on others that's so horrendous. At the same time, we identify a lot with that negativity ourselves, and it's like a boulder that lays on us, but it is a form of laziness. This is a form of an attitude of a totality of perception and perspective, where we feel like victims, and so we give ourselves a justification while maintaining anger and arrogance and all these negative kinds of things, but we give ourselves a justification of not moving to change anything in our life by simply saying nothing is worth it, everything is terrible, whatever I do will result in absolutely nothing. And so we remain and maintain the status quo negativity in our life. And the third way of being lazy is a simple form of ignorance, where we just let ignorance sweep over us and gloss over us and just get swept away by our addictions to anger, addictions to addictions or desire, addiction to being jealous and constantly contrasting and comparing. He's got this, I don't have this. Why does he have this? Why don't I? Etc., etc. You know, this kind of a hungry ghost mentality. And so those three kinds of laziness, they're subtle. They are really kind of how we identify with ourselves. Because if we don't identify with the open space of awareness, which is ineffable, which is that field, the quality of our mind, but we identify with behaviors and events that happen in that space, whether we identify with being a depressed person, being this unsatisfied person, being this always hungry, restless person, you know, all these kinds of types of laziness seep into us in a very subtle way, and they become something that we identify very strongly. So now, not only do we identify as I am Bill, I'm a this, you know, we also identify with a form of laziness which sweeps and washes over our life in a very strong way. And what I wanted to say today, a very important point for all of us to think about and to take into our meditation. We talk a lot about difficulties and suffering, because in the context of karma, we have to discuss those kinds of things and to unpack what difficulties truly mean, not just this kind of glossy, you know, stupid, ignorant way of how we are habitually thinking about difficulties. But today, instead of speaking about difficulties, I want to speak about what happiness is, what we have heard being taught by our teachers about happiness. And a very, very simple way to think about happiness is this, is when you remove all these layers of afflictions, you remove this boulder of negativity from your mind, you remove the boulder of ignorance, the twofold ignorance of being separated from everything. And the second ignorance is the ignorance of elaboration, when we're always judging and we're like in this meat grinder, always, you know, when we experience things, but we put it through the grinder. This yellow flower, I hate it. Somebody that I can't stand gave me that flower, and that, you know, and on and on and on and on, and we get captured and captivated in these homemade movies all day long, and we forget to breathe and experience, and we forget to be happy. But really, the happiness is not like another object out there that we're gonna get after we get this job, or we get this car, or we get this house. Happiness is not one of any of the things in this world. You know, we've had so many things of this world. We've tasted so many different kinds of flavors. And, you know, by the minute you get that car that you worked for the last 20 years, and somebody's going to scratch it, your suffering is going to be so enormous. And even when you're paying for that car, at that very instance, you're already thinking, oh my God, where am I going to keep it? How am I going to keep it protected? I don't want anybody to scratch it. I mean, it's like all these kinds of things are nothing but suffering. But happiness is none of these things. Happiness does not rest in any of these worldly things. It's not a phenomenon in the world. What it is a removal of obscurations, the veil of ignorance and the veil of affliction. When we don't have the five afflictions and we understand the nature of ourselves, our nature, and the nature of all beings and of all things, when we understand that open ground of being, luminous, and just okay with itself. Like, we have to understand that our ultimate, because we always, in Buddhism, we always talk about the ultimate nature, relative nature. Our ultimate nature is perfect. Taisito Rinpoche starts often his teachings with this. He always says, our ultimate nature, my ultimate nature, his ultimate nature, your ultimate nature, all beings' ultimate nature, Buddha nature, or the ground as we call it. We call it many different names, but it's the same. It's reality. Reality is always okay. It's unbreakable. It's always good. It's always okay. That's what we in Buddhism refer to as Samanta Bhadra condition. it's unstainable. It's unbreakable. It doesn't come into existence. It doesn't cease from existence. It doesn't. There's no way to stain it. It's like space. It's always there. It's always okay. The relative nature, our afflicted mind with the ego, with all this kinds of machinery of creating samsara, longing for other things, that's not okay. And so we have to get these two things, into one pile. We're bringing a relative mind to our ultimate condition. That's what the journey is, that's what the path is. But on an ultimate level, everything is always okay. And this is really where happiness rests. So when we can liberate our afflictions, being free from hatred, anger, delusion, attachment, and jealousy, that is happiness. Being able to see a person that, yesterday we hated, but today we see that person in his or her Buddha nature. We remember their and our own ultimate nature. And we remember ultimate nature is the ground of all things. That is happiness. Staying in the view, bringing the view, being mindful. That is happiness. Happiness is being able to forbear gladly, not just with perseverance, but with gladness, all the difficulties that we have, because we know we're purifying, we're removing obscurations, we're removing karmic things that we've created. It's like we're cleaning house, and when the house, our interior, the more we remove, the more garbage and refuse we get rid of, happiness will emerge, because happiness is like a clean window through which we can see the sun, and obscurations and afflictions are like the dirt on that window. It makes our vision impaired, because even though we're in this little box, the sun is right there, but the windows are dirty. That's our mind, conceptual mind. And if we clean it, happiness is there. It's always present. Happiness is part of our innate condition. It's part of our ground. Feeling okay, knowing we are okay is a natural condition. It's actually just simply a part of us, and it allows us to rejoice. And so watching the mind, removing obscurations, removing afflictions, difficult situation arises, you go, oh, my friend, you're difficult. I am going to work on you, and I'm going to remove you, because I refuse to have my happiness be obscured. So I wanted to mention that today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What are some questions? I'm in northern India. Yesterday I encountered a group that was offering free 15-minute Kundalini meditation. When I attempted to meditate with them, they demanded to know what organization I meditate with. I told them the name of the temple I first learned in Thailand. The man again demanded to know my organization. I left saying, I wish them peace. Is this normal? I don't know anything. I don't know anything about Kundalini meditation. And I don't know who these people are, and I don't know. I can't really answer that question, if it's normal or who they were. I don't even know if they're Buddhists necessarily. I don't know, maybe if you want to elaborate, but in Buddhist centers are open to anyone. There's certain practices that have prerequisites and stuff like that. You know what I mean? That like anything. You can't suddenly be in a black belt class if you're a beginner. But the institutions themselves are open to anyone, no matter if you're a Buddhist or not, if you have money or not, or if you learn it or not, or trained or not. So, and anyone that is that unwelcoming, I would be suspicious of. I want to find a teacher, but ironically or not, my mind tells me, why would any master of any lineage want to teach me? Feels like such an imposition. I wouldn't dream of asking Jimi Hendrix how to make a bar chord. Is there an actual protocol to finding a teacher and asking to be taught? Well, you have to understand that's why the teachers are here. You know, like she said before, we don't dedicate something to Buddha. The Buddhas don't need anything from us. The teachers don't need anything from us. They're here. They're on the planet to help us. You know, so um, and to say why would any master of any of these want to teach me? You know, that's the flip side of being egoistical, right? Is that, you know, when we kind of we're so bad we're impossible or we're beyond teaching, you know what I mean? That's the flip side of ego. You're kind of again isolating yourself as a special case. um the reason why there are teachers is because we need teaching. You know, they're here to help us, uh you know, on the path to liberation. The As far as a protocol, well, yeah, you know, you have to seek one out and, you know, find a teacher. And you know, Buddha also said about his own teachings as well, but in terms of finding a teacher, the same thing applies. um, Really, you should examine a teacher. And then they say in the scriptures for quite a long time, you know, and Buddha himself said, you should examine what I'm saying and see if it works for you and see if it makes sense for you before you blindly follow me. Buddha didn't come, lay down these scriptures and saying, this is the way it is. If you, if you want to follow me, you'll do exactly what I says. That's not at all a Buddhist perspective. It was, this is what I found. This is what I've discovered. For me, it's worked. You should take a look at it if you're interested, and if it works for you, then you should follow it. And the same thing for a teacher. You should really examine the teacher and see if you feel a connection and you feel if this teacher is right. Um, that's really the protocol. Is really, you have to do the legwork to find the teacher, though. You know what I mean? And as they say, there's a saying. I don't think it's just attributed to Buddhism, but like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Um, it's said that that's a universal law, actually. So, but to think of yourself as why would any master of lineage want to teach me is really, you know, you're kind of separating yourself from the pack, really thinking that you're such a special case that a master wouldn't want you. That's why the masters are there. Would you like to add anything to that?
Well, we just spoke about the three kinds of laziness. One of them is this rejection of oneself and therefore kind of blocking the path. Uh, so just to beware, you and all sentient beings, all of us, we have Buddha nature. All the teachings are aimed at showing us, introducing this Buddha nature to us. That is why the teachers come into the world and come back again and again to teach us about our Buddha nature, to liberate us from our suffering. We are our worst enemies. We are actually our only enemies. There are no other natural enemies except our ego. So, um, just meditate on unblocking your path, moving forward toward toward liberation, toward ripening and liberation. If you are really interested in teachings, you will find your teacher as long as you don't allow your mind to block the path.
Hey guys, if a loved one suffers heavily with these three elements of laziness, how do you bring it to their attention without offending them? I think it's better if you focus on your own laziness, because if you're focusing on your own laziness, then that improves your practice, and then your practice kind of opening and flourishing will have an effect on those close to you, your loved ones. They have to, like you and like me, have to see why it's important to overcome the laziness, and that doesn't necessarily happen with. It can be very tricky if you say it. You're being lazy and you should do this. In Dharma, you need to awaken from yourself. It's not like someone's going to say you need to practice Buddhism. That often may push the person away than anything. But like the best advertisement for Dharma among your circles, your close circles, is often if they start to see some kind of little bit of a difference in how you behave towards them or how you behave in life, and and they see a little movement in your own way of being.
I would also say that if you really do feel that the gift of Dharma, the benefit of Dharma is something you truly want to give, you do it without any judgment. You say, do you want to meditate? Offer maybe a teaching online. I mean, there's so much on YouTube. Offer a book. Offer a way out that does not include judgment and pointing the finger. Whatever you do, as long as your intention is right, also make sure that with the intention the method is right. May it not come out in the form of judgment or pointing out something as a fault. We all have these three kinds of laziness. We have the stupid laziness, we have the restless laziness, and we have the self-defeatist laziness. We all have it. We fluctuate constantly between all these three. Some of us, of course, suffer very deeply because we take a certain path and ingrain it tremendously into our personality, into our behavioral matrix. So trying to help someone undo that, especially if we've done that and worked with that for ourselves, we have to do it like the teachers do with us, with loving kindness. Make sure that it does not have harshness with words, body, speech, and mind.
Is therapy a form of meditation? I would say no. I mean, I think therapy can be very beneficial and constructive if it's with the right therapist and the right approach. Meditation is meditation. There are many ways of, there are many methods of meditation, different types of meditation, but they're all specifically, really about working with the mind and calming the mind, centering, calming things down, and looking at the mind. They're usually that. And even when you do group meditation practice, the group isn't doing the meditation for you or necessarily with you. You're meditating alongside a group, but you can only meditate with your own mind. Even when you're being guided, it's still you working with your own mind, no matter what your guidance is. But I mean, therapy, often therapists suggest meditation. I think, it's important to, I talk to some people, they say, oh, this is my meditation, bike riding. And it's like, bike riding is bike riding. There can be a meditative aspect to it sometimes where your mind is kind of clear or focused, but it's not meditation. It's riding a bike, and there's a thing called walking meditation, but often that's really tricky, and really it helps if you have a strong foundation of the actual sitting practice, because taking a walking meditation often becomes taking a walk, which can be meditative in a sense, but it's not necessarily meditation. Walking can be very pleasurable, can be calming, can be centering, but often the meditation can get lost if we don't have a strong foundation of what meditation actually is. I've met people say, oh, taking baths is my meditation, but taking a bath is taking a bath. It's not really necessarily meditation. Meditation is very specific. That said, therapy can be very, very beneficial in terms of seeing our mental patterns, seeing our habits, and getting an insight and advice on how to approach them and deal with them.
And also something to what Michael was saying as well. In therapy, we use conceptual mind to analyze and to undo certain kinds of situations. In meditation, there is an analytical portion to meditation, but it is certainly not conceptual mind in the way that we use it in the world, in what we call the relative portion of ourselves. really in meditation, we try to get, and first of all, in meditation, our mind is the only object of what we're meditating on. When we're observing mental events, we understand them as a part of our mind, happening within the space of our awareness. There are different things, of course, as Michael said, but meditation can certainly open that space that can create tremendous velocity for being able to progress in a therapeutic environment. Because a lot of times, in therapy, we're dealing with the knots and the ties and the difficulties and obstructive kinds of elements and situations which hinder our life, which make us suffer a lot. But just to keep in mind, in Buddhist meditation, it's not relaxation, it's not thinking about stuff. Buddhist meditation, we're trying to get at the space of our awareness, or the nature of our awareness. And we're not working at all with conceptual mind, or very little. We're working with conceptual mind. We're working really with a very fine quality of awareness in its kind of most open, basic sense.
That's a good distinction. What are examples, good examples of intentions, or how can I set better intentions?
Thank you. Good intentions are intentions which are based on benefiting other sentient beings with every word, with every action, with every thought. If we don't put ourselves first, because every time we put ourselves first, we will experience suffering. And I'm not saying to be a doormat, but there's a big distinction about having a heart that can incorporate the welfare of others, rather than that small egoistical space that's always fluctuating between likes and dislikes. I started our talk today by saying that is a machinery for how to create suffering. So if your intention understands and knows and is sensitive to not fluctuating between these likes and dislikes, but incorporating others as a primary goal of how we move through the world, those are the right intentions. Right intentions are always to benefit others. That's how we start the class. We set our intention on others' benefit. Remember, when we want to benefit all sentient beings, we're included. We don't have to identify ourselves as special cases. We are included in the all, and those are the right intentions.
Do you know many married couples in which one becomes a Buddhist practitioner, the other does not? Do you believe the relationship will suffer for the lack of unity? I know we know couples where one person is Buddhist or into Buddhism, and the other's not. It's every couple's different. There's no one rule applies. Like I said before to the other person who was asking about, pointing out laziness to a loved one, often, leading by example is a good thing, and the partner may see certain positive changes in the person who's practicing and be inspired to follow along or not. Like I said, there's no one rule applies. So often it's like with our kids, especially when they become teenagers. Our kids were little and they were around Buddhism a little bit, and so it's best not to try to force. I think it's important. Someone said, "Thank you. Rejection of self is an important."
I wanted to add to this previous question. We know many couples actually in our Sangha. I have a dear friend who has now learned Tibetan and can translate. And she always said, and her husband is not a practitioner, she's a very devout practitioner. She spends a lot of time coming up to retreats and translating and doing all kinds of things like that. She's also a teacher by profession, so it's just a part of, you know, who she is. She always says that her husband's generosity and support is so tremendous. It exceeds so much everything that she's learned. She always says that through my Buddhist studies, I have to become as kind as he is, you know. And it's very important to remember and distinguish, you know, as Buddhists, we're not making judgment and saying he's less or, you know, she's less because they're not Buddhist. You know, Buddhism is just a word. It's like saying yellow. You know, all we're trying to do is awaken our heart to its maximum potential, our mind to its maximum potential. We're not really trying to be a part of a sect or anything like that, you know. So just, you know, making sure that we steer in the proper way with love and compassion. We're not there to make judgment on anyone. And it doesn't matter what we call ourselves. There are many, many people who did not have to follow the Buddhist path, who did not have to go to Buddhist temples and practices. They are already so kind and so beautiful. They're already like exceedingly, you know, everything that we aspire to be. So to make sure we're not passing judgment and not using Buddhism as a kind of a stick or something to make judgment or isolate someone, or you know, we're not like a special group. We're just dumb people who want to be better, kinder, and have love and have open awareness. You know, we just want to grow up. That's basically why we're in the teachings. And these teachings are like medicine for us. It's like going to the doctor to eradicate a disease being ignorance and afflictions. That's all we're there for. We're not there to become indoctrinated or anything like this. You know, Buddhism is not really a religion, and it's not like belonging to a sect. Buddhism is just an awareness that we're dumb and we're working on ourselves, that we're small and we want to become bigger, that we're stupid and we want to see more, and we want to see more and become free of afflictions to the ultimate extent of where we ripen and blossom into our ultimate nature of love and compassion on the level of Buddhas, you know, those who see all, know all, give all love and compassion, will become that.
There's several people writing about death of a loved one, and two people writing about death of a father and dealing with grief and things like that. And you know, we talk about in this class how like samsara, you know, it is basically like a certain delusion or illusion. I mean, we see things that we, you know, impugn as real and reality, and they're illusion in terms of we see it from a very narrow perspective rather than, like Victoria was talking about, ultimate truth. We see things from a very subjective point of view, and often Buddhists refer to that, you know, seeing our reality as an illusion. And even the great master Marpa, on the death of his son, someone said, "You're a great master and you always talk about reality being an illusion. Why are you so sad if this is an illusion that your son is dead?" And he said, "Because this was a very great illusion. This son, this love he had for his son, and his son dying, that and because he was weeping and he was very remorseful." And as far as grief, you know, you're gonna feel grief. You know, it's very real. It's very natural. You know, the people in my life that I lost, that I was very close to, it's always a, you know, in the beginning, you can be very paralyzed by it because it's overwhelming, and the suddenness and the loss. And that lessens over time, but actually the absence of the person doesn't lessen. You know, the people that I really, really miss, I always miss, and I think letting it come, letting the grief come up, and having gratitude for having that person in your life. The people that I miss, I remember their love, and how that love made me feel, that unconditional love, and knowing how valuable that can be to give to others, if you can learn that from their legacy, As a general note, I want to talk about that very briefly because we're going to close in a second here. But we get a lot of, like, how do I deal with this person? How do I deal with that person? This difficult parent, this difficult brother, this difficult employer, and things like that. And the reason why we have the class, right, is to introduce you to meditation. Some of you have been inspired to maybe get into Buddhism and use that as a path. It's like, bringing this into your life as a regular thing, meditation or even Buddhism, is a process. It's not just like, so it's hard to just say, well, if you do this, your relationship's going to be better with this person. If you commit to this path and this process, things will definitely change. But it's often hard to just extract this abstract rule to give to you and say, if this person does this to you, this is how you can counter that and how it's better. If you are if you're inspired by whatever we're talking about, whatever we're doing here, and are inspired to kind of commit to integrating these things into your life on a regular basis, all those things will change to some degree, shift to some degree. Your interaction, your relationship with those things will. But it's often hard to just say, to extract some kind of nugget to say, well, if you're not doing this as a regular thing, and if you're not committed, that this kind of little, adjustment's going to make a big difference. It often takes a lot of time, and it's an investment and a commitment in time, like learning anything. Learning a musical instrument. You're not, it's like, it's not going to happen in a day. It's not going to happen if, Wynton Marsalis says, well, press the stops on your trumpet a little hard. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a lot that has to go into these things, and kind of sorting out and breaking down our how we approach our relationships and things. But committing to meditation as a daily thing, or almost daily thing, or very regular thing, things will shift without a doubt. I mean, they may not shift in the way you want them to shift. They may, they may not shift in the speed that you want it to happen, and it may not happen the way you think it should happen, but things will shift. So with that, we'll close today. Is there anything you want to add to that? Or, we've almost been here for 3 years doing this class, and which is really kind of amazing. I never thought that it would continue for that long. And a lot of that is due to Nick Solidio, our producer, who without him, this never would have happened.
Nick also does this voluntarily.
Yeah.
There's no transactional exchange between us of any kind. He comes, he volunteers his time every week for the benefit of the group, and that is practice. That's practicing in the world in real time, And also all of you, by coming to the group, that's practice. We're all here on the same basis.
Yeah, without a doubt. So thank you, Nick. Thank you all for coming and for being here. As on a perfect, on a selfish basis, having this class has really helped my own meditation practice. Being able to commit to doing it with you every week. So, and I thank Nick for that as well, and thank you. So let's dedicate the merit from today's class, whatever merit was generated by today's class, for the benefit of all beings by saying the dedication prayer. By this merit, may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. See you next week.